An ancient people has lived for centuries deep in the rainforest. I've heard these people could be the descendants of a lost Amazonian civilization. In their rituals, they travel to realms we can hardly imagine. Where some see a waterfall, these people see the home of the creator of the world. Now I'm traveling deep into the forest to meet them, and if possible, learn to see the world through their eyes. Mitu, Colombia, a small town on the northern edge of the Amazon rainforest. I first came here 33 years ago to study the plants used by the Indian people. But while I was here, I made a brief visit to an ancient culture, possibly descendants of a lost civilization, whose worldview was said to be one of the most sophisticated and complex in all the Amazon. I've come back all these years later to join an old friend of mine, Martin von Hildebrand, a legendary Colombian anthropologist who's been working with these people for all of that time.
Hola Martín, ¿cómo se fue? Bien.
Oh, qué bueno verte.
Qué bueno verte.
Bien, pues, bien, bien, pues.
Finally we're here.
Usted está
Wonderful.
divinamente, ¿no?
No, sí.
Looking great.
Empezamos.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Martin has invited me and the crew to travel with him far into the Colombian forest, to the remote Piraparaná River. There we'll visit sites few outsiders have ever seen. 4 closely related peoples live there, and our host will be one of them, the Barasana. In the years since I was last here, towns like Mitu have sprung up all over the Amazon basin. The influx of outsiders has led to the disappearance of many indigenous peoples. But Martin tells me this has not happened to the Barasana and their neighbors. His life work has been dedicated to securing legal land rights for the Indians of the Colombian Amazon, where they can preserve their unique traditions and ways of life. He tells me the people of the Piraparaná express their most profound beliefs in elaborate ritual dances. So our ultimate goal is to take part in one of the most sacred rituals these people perform. But before this can happen, the river people have decided that we must take a series of journeys to prepare us for the ceremony. With us on the flight is Ricardo Marin, the first of several river people to guide us on our journey. He is a Barasana shaman, trained to move with ease between the physical and spiritual dimensions of his world. Ricardo tells us that for him the mountains, rivers, and waterfalls below us are both physical places and sacred sites. It seems the landscape itself contains the wisdom of his ancestors. I know that I'm about to enter a world and meet people who we hardly understand at all. The real challenge then will be to see things through their eyes, to try to share their deepest experiences through their rituals. When we arrive in San Miguel, Ricardo's village, we are summoned to the longhouse, the Maloca, to meet the people and hear their views on our film plans. Members of Akaya P, the Association of the 4 River Peoples, speak in their own unique Amazonian languages.
It is time we showed the white people that we still respect our ancestors and look after our world. They need to know that we don't want them to damage our forests and rivers. We should support these film people.
Bueno, gracias a todos. Y como algunos de ustedes saben,
Hace mucho tiempo, cuando yo era joven, yo llegué aquí en ese mismo Maloca, en el año 1970.
In my broken Spanish, I express our gratitude for being allowed to come and learn from them.
Su amistad. Gracias.
Our ultimate goal is to film the first really big ceremony in the annual ritual cycle that occurs in a few weeks. But meanwhile, I have a chance to observe a smaller ritual here in San Miguel. And my hosts offer to guide me through the process. This, they tell me, is the first dance which celebrates the coming of the dry season, a time of abundance, as fruit and crops ripen in the forests and gardens. The men wear their finest feather headdresses. They consider these to be sacred objects passed down from their ancestors. In between the dances, I'm offered chicha, a mildly fermented drink. The men, who tell me they've not eaten all day, also take tobacco snuff and coca powder, the spirit food of the ritual. As midnight approaches, the men take yahe, also known as ayahuasca, the vine of the soul. It contains powerful mind-altering chemicals that induce kaleidoscopic visions, hallucinations that transform all sense of time and space. The dance flows on through the night until the first rays of dawn. The great ceremony taking place in a few weeks' time is dedicated to the women. Known as the cassava bread dance, it's like a harvest festival and celebrates the river people's staple food. This is a large root called bitter manioc. It's easy to grow, but when it comes out of the ground, it's highly poisonous. It contains in its raw state enough prussic acid to blind or even kill you. Yet 3,000 years ago, the women of the Amazon basin discovered how to remove the poison, transforming a deadly plant into the nutritious, life-giving basis of their diet. Here in the northwest Amazon, the women grate the manioc roots, then wash the mash to remove the poison and free the natural starch. These tasks take place in the great longhouse, or maloca, social and spiritual center of the river people's world. Cassava bread is the heart of the big ritual to come. It's also what we eat at communal breakfast every day. As in mythology worldwide, our daily bread is both just food and a metaphor for spiritual nourishment. As we eat, Shaman Ricardo contacts the ancestral spirits. He seeks their permission for us to travel upstream, to visit the most sacred places in the river people's universe. In their myths, the Barasana and their neighbors say they had their origins on the main Amazon River. Then they set off upstream on an epic journey to their present homes. Now it's our turn to follow in their footsteps, upriver, deeper into the forest. Our guides on this trip are Robertico and Shaman Ricardo's sister, Rosa. She is taking us to a site which is sacred for all the women, a place with both physical and mystical dimensions.
This is where, on the ancestral journey, we women were given manioc, and we learned how to make it into cassava bread. It was a gift from the giant anaconda that lived under the waterfall.
Entonces, acá se llama chorro de casabe, popularmente, se conoce así,
Sí.
pero en realidad...
So basically what he's saying is that as you see this rock, there's a hole behind that rock, and that's where they kept the starch, right? And the rock here is the woman that sings to the stars, that sings in the rituals, which we will also see in the ritual when we're up there.
Rosa seems to be saying that this rock is also a spirit called Cassava Woman, and she will appear in human form in the great ritual to come. As we travel on, my guides explain that the river people don't believe in a single god. Rather, they say that supernatural beings existed before people were created. Some were mythic heroes, others were demons. And sometimes the two would clash. Upriver from Cassava Falls is the site of one of these mythic battles. Here, a powerful demon blocked the path of the ancestors upstream, until the arrival of 4 heroes called the Iowa, the Thunders. The Thunders slipped past the demon, then hurled it into the rock.
Este era un ser malo. Era el dueño.
This was an evil being. It was the master of this land. It controlled everything, and it didn't want any other people here.
So it's really a story about the culture heroes bringing order to chaos and creating civilization.
Exactly, and allowing the people there in this world to live with nature. So the human beings that came to this world after the cultural heroes, they prepared the world so human beings could live in nature, so they could connect back with nature, because these beings wouldn't allow the human beings to live in this world. He said one should not look at this a lot, because by looking at it, it can do harm.
What about us being here right now?
Well, that's why they said we shouldn't stay long, we should move on. He said don't spend much time here because it's dangerous, it's not good to spend time here. But the Paye up at the ritual healed this. He spoke to these spirits, and he said, look, it's okay, I've spoken with them, you can go and you can look at them. But he asked them for permission for us to come and look.
So even though order prevailed over chaos, they still sense the presence of evil in this place. The river people insist that this petroglyph was not made by humans, and there are no other designs like this anywhere else on their rivers. But they are similar to motifs I've seen on pottery from the lost civilizations of the Amazon. We know that 500 years ago, the Amazon basin was very densely settled. Millions of people lived in large villages and towns along the river. Complex societies with regional and local chiefs, priests, warriors, and commoners. The legacy of other great South American civilizations, like the Inca, were their magnificent stone monuments. They have easily stood the test of time. But the Amazonians built their settlements with wood and thatch. It was truly monumental architecture, but it did not endure. So their civilization left almost no traces behind. Yet high up in the headwaters, a few isolated peoples like the Barasana still build these elaborate structures. Above the barriers of waterfalls and rapids, life remained quite undisturbed right up until the early 1960s, when Christian missionaries finally arrived. In my experience, this normally leads to the rapid collapse of traditional culture. So I wonder, what exactly happened here? The arrival of missionaries in Colombia's Piraparaná River was a real challenge to the local people. The first time that outsiders had a permanent presence in the region.
When the missionaries and the priests first arrived here, did the Barasana know what they were getting themselves in for?
And when the missionaries first came, they felt that they were somehow they were going to turn them into people, because they felt, I mean, the white people said that the Indians weren't people. And so they didn't really understand how that would happen, but that's what they felt. They would turn us into something. They would shape us into being human beings for the white people.
At about the same time, in the early 1970s, the Bharasana and their neighbors were the subject of a British documentary film, War of the Gods. It showed Indian children in mission boarding schools being indoctrinated into the civilized world of Christianity. At the same time, a young British couple, anthropologists Stephen and Christine Hugh Jones, were studying the Bharasana. Christine believed that they were already civilized in their own way.
I think what everybody's failed to see is that these Indians do have a civilization, and I mean civilization as opposed to primitive state or whatever. And it is in many ways as involved and as intricate a civilization as our own.
The couple lived with the Bharasana for 2 years and completely immersed themselves in their culture, learning to speak their language fluently. But at the time, both believed that under pressure from the missionaries, Bharasana traditions were doomed.
They are fully aware of the fact that the whole thing is dying out. The trouble is that the missionaries, coming from a stronger culture and far more convinced that they are right, will ultimately win.
But Ricardo and his people came to realize that conversion to Christianity also meant the death of their own religion. No feather headdresses, no more dances or respect for the ancestors. It was a price they were not prepared to pay, and the missionaries were told to leave in 1976. I knew that at this time Martine was becoming involved in the struggle of the river peoples to gain control over their lands and destiny. Then, in 1986, the President of Colombia put Martine in charge of the nation's Indian affairs. He knew that they had to start with their most basic needs.
We soon realized that the first step that had to be taken was get the land. And we started working on that, and it took us 20 years to get the land, or perhaps a bit less. We went for the whole east of the Colombian Amazon. We went for 20 million hectares, and now we have 24 million hectares, the size of the UK, California. And then after that, we started pushing the laws that existed up to a constitutional level. And that is not only the recognition of the territories, but also the local governments, their right to run their own territories, rubber barons.
Now Colombia is the champion of indigenous rights worldwide. It formally recognizes its Amazonian peoples as custodians and protectors of this critically important environment. With help from Martine and his organization, the Gaia Amazon Foundation, the Bharasana and their neighbors have now developed their own educational system. It combines the national curriculum in Spanish with traditional teaching in their own languages. Beyond education, the vast territory set aside for the river people is the essential element in safeguarding both their survival and the continuity of their traditions. Next day, our guide Rosa takes us a step further toward understanding the structure of the river people's world. Far up in the headwaters, she will show us exactly how nature contains within it both the macro world of the universe and the micro world of the Maloka. So we set out once again in the wake of the mythic heroes, the Thunders. After a few hours, we come to a waterfall. Here they say the Thunders stop to eat. And these are the indentations of their pots, which give this place its name, Cooking Pot Falls. It's a struggle getting the large aluminum canoe up the falls. Above the falls, the stream narrows, and cliffs and bluffs hem us in. Rosa tells us we are now at the center of the river people's world. For them, these cliffs are also giant house posts which hold up the universe. Sacred sites like these are scattered all over the river people's territory. Their shamans see them as arranged in a pattern, as a giant maloka, which is the universe itself.
It's a maloka, which is the universe, as if the universe was a big place where we're all living as a maloka, and the maloka, where they hold the rituals, the houses where people live, are a small model of the universe. It's the universe, a replication of the universe made by human beings to manage the universe.
Just around the bend, there is another site which plays a key role in the cassava bread ritual we plan to film. It's called the Cliff of the Manioc Starch. Rosa says that while the cliff is white, all is well. But if it were to turn dark, then crops would fail, and famine would spread across the world.
We believe that this cliff is the soul of all our women, that our white souls are here, and this is our essence. This place is also a house pole which holds up the universe and where we work in the Maloka.
So this cliff is also the house post where the women grate their manioc. It's a specific spot in both the universe and the longhouse that people live and work in today. Now we're beginning to follow the connections between the ancestral world of the cosmos, the natural world of the forest and rivers, and the domestic world of work and home. After more than a week on the river, we finally arrive at the village where the cassava bread dance is going to take place, Puerto Ortega. Our host is Renel, a respected Barasana shaman and ritual expert. He has invited all his neighbors to attend the great celebration. He wants our cameras to witness the full power of the finest ceremony his people can produce, the greatest gathering of the river peoples for many generations. Inside his maloka, the women have already prepared a large stack of cassava bread, the bounty of the ceremony. To keep it fresh, they cover it with special white leaves. According to Renel, opening the bundle and distributing the bread will bring the dance to a close. Another key element in all their ceremonies is coca. As they harvest the leaves, Renel teaches the children some of the traditional songs they will hear at the dance. As he works, he tells me that coca is an extremely sacred plant, containing the essence of life. A magical substance which he uses at all rituals and healing ceremony. I find that taking coca in its natural form is a mild and very pleasant stimulant, which suppresses hunger and fatigue. It has both a sacred and a practical value in a ritual which will last for 2 days and nights. When explorers first penetrated the Amazon headwaters, they reported small communities with simple lifestyles, but they had no insight into the inner complexities of the cultures of the Northwest Amazon. However, when anthropologists learned their languages and took part in their rituals, they made extraordinary discoveries. Rich and complex belief systems. These all seem to have more in common with the lost civilizations of the Amazon than with the simple dispersed peoples reported by the first explorers. One of the first to publish these findings was Stephen Hugh Jones, the young anthropologist in the film War of the Gods.
Amazing.
How was the journey?
Oh, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
What a house.
I know.
Wow, and the day, oh, it's fabulous. It just brings back such memories.
Now a respected elder in the community, he's the world's leading expert on Barasana ritual and the only academic scholar who speaks their language fluently. He and Raynell will be our guides through the intricacies of the great ceremony to come. Raynell and Stephen agree that as final preparation for the ceremony, we should visit the most sacred site in the region. We set off the next day to pick up a guide for the journey, and I get a chance to ask Stephen about how this ancient culture, once threatened, was able to survive.
When we made the film, the theme of the film was that the Indians were bound to disappear because the missionaries were bound to win. The government had told them to civilize the Indians, and that was what was going to happen. But the guys who disappeared were the missionaries. And the Indians haven't disappeared. I mean, their culture hasn't disappeared as we've seen.
But there must have been something in the people themselves and in their traditions and in their culture.
But what I'm seeing is basically the upcountry cousins of the Amazonian civilizations of the Middle Amazon. These are, I wouldn't say the remnants, they're a continuity of the high civilizations, the big concentrated populations, chiefdoms, etc., of the Middle Amazonia, which we no longer have, but we certainly have here.
In their rituals, in their traditions, in their patterns of economy, give us a sense of almost a lost civilization as to, or an echo of what was once across the entire Amazon.
At its heart lies their relationship with the natural world.
It is precisely through their ritual activities that they give life to the forest and the forest gives life to them. For them, the whole forest is a living entity with which they have to dialogue as if they have to dialogue with their neighbors next door. And it's one and the same system.
With the ceremony now just a few days away, Raynell invokes the spirits that will protect us on our journey to the home of the river people's greatest mythic hero, the Earth Mother. We can hear the roar of a waterfall long before we can see it, and as it comes into sight, we are all overwhelmed. We are now in the Maloka of shaman woman, Romi Kumu, creator of all things. Here she gave birth to the first humans and taught them how to dance for her.
All these sacred sites are created by Romi Kumu. She goes to all these sites and she is creating it because she's the mother of all these sites.
Behind the waterfall is a cave containing many boulders. Behind them, a pool covered in vegetation. It seems almost to be a world in miniature. Raynell told me its waters are the most holy in the world. They're birth waters of all of humanity.
These boulders are the first people in their Malacca. This is a jaguar guardian figure. Around him are the guests who have been invited to Romi Kumu's first dance. On the other side are the hosts, Romi Kumu's people. They are greeting their guests. It is the opening of the dance.
A mythic moment, set in stone. On the cave floor, there are mysterious carvings. These are the patterns on the outside of Maloka, which the dancers see when they take the hallucinogenic potion, Yahe. Here is the shaman's rattle. These petroglyphs are shaman woman's commandments for the great dance, and she signed them personally.
Now, Romi Kumu, who is the creator and owner of this house, wherever she goes, she leaves her footprint. So that is her footprint, that footprint there.
But for the river people, these are far more than relics of some ancient event.
I don't get the sense that they think of it in terms of linear history, that the two events sort of are almost simultaneously occurring at all times. In other words, it's not like this happened then, we learned from this, and now we do it this way, or something. It's literally the two things are happening in what you refer to.
This is a wonderful example of it, because this house is a house that happened at the beginning of time, and here we are.
Yeah.
And it's very like the Australian dream time. It's the same sort of idea that the primordial time is concurrent with our everyday reality. Yeah. And what happens during all the rituals is that when they put on the feathers and all the rest of it, time is collapsed so that micro space of the house becomes the macro space of the universe, and ordinary people are simultaneously ancestral people, so that time is squashed.
Now I can see that these sacred sites are not memorials. They are not symbols or representations. They are living places that eternally inform the present. We've seen Ramikumu's commandments engraved in stone and witnessed the power of the sacred sites. Now our preparations for the great celebration are complete. We return to Rinel's Maloka the day before the dance will begin. Everybody is busy completing the last preparations before all normal daily routines are suspended for 2 days. The women and children may eat during the ceremony, and they must feed their guests. But they cannot work, so all the food must be prepared today. The men will not eat at all for the 2 days of the ceremony. Gathering up the manioc and other foods like peach palm and avocados, they make their way to a stream to bathe and wash the food. Back in Rinel's Maloka, all the women work together to peel the large supply of manioc they will need. Rinel's sister gently molds her loaf of cassava bread. This is the lady who will be transformed into the primordial cassava woman tomorrow.
In our myths, the first being was a woman, Romikumu. She existed before we had manioc. She created everything. The Malacca and everything to do with the rituals, food, and procreation. She created all these things. And that's why the women's role is so central, so essential, supremely important.
During the ceremony, the men will only consume spirit foods, coca, tobacco, cigars, and snuff, chicha, and the hallucinogen yahe. By now, Rinel is spending nearly all his time chanting spells and incantations. This spell releases the feather headdress makers. As these are sacred objects, making them is considered a dangerous process. The two men have not been allowed to leave the Maloka, eat meat or fish, or even see their wives and children for the last 3 weeks. Outside, the men prepare brilliant crowns and handheld feather ornaments.
The dances are divided in 2 halves. You have the little dance, which is during the day, and then they will change their ornaments and put on the big feather crowns. But during this day, they're going to be dancing umwabasa, or oropendular dance, and that's what these feather crown, those sort of sunbursts at the top there are. These are the tail feathers of this oropendular bird, and that's what they're dancing.
Just hours before the dance begins, people transform themselves with decoration. All the men must have their legs painted by the women with a black vegetable dye. The patterns the women use are the same employed on baskets, so our bodies become like empty containers, ready to be filled with the knowledge and wisdom of the ancestral beings and their universe. The first guests arrive for one of the greatest gatherings of the river peoples for many years. Rosa Marin is accompanied by her grandson and many other people from San Miguel, where we started our journey. Others are due from several of the nearby Moluccas. Raynel is determined that the dance will last for a full 2 days and nights. By now I understand that the house is a microcosm of the universe. But in rituals, Stephen says, it also becomes a human body. The house beams its bones, the roof thatch its hair. Its heart is a box suspended in the center of the building. It contains the sacred feather headdresses. Right now it is closed and asleep. When it is taken down and opened, it will wake up and transform the dancers. It's 5 o'clock, well before dawn, as the dancing begins.
The small dance, which starts before dawn, is more for pleasure and happiness. It's that type of ritual. At this time, the mood in the Malacca is not very profound. It's the time when the women and children, everyone should be content. This is how we prepare to enter into a much more sacred state. It's as if we are weaving a protective nest or wrapping for the much more profound big dance.
Stephen tells me that the dancers' crowns turn their heads into suns, the feathers its shining rays. So the dance line becomes a constellations moving through the heavens. Though the mood is still light-hearted, Raynel begins to draw the dancers toward ancestral time with his chants. He is preparing them for the more serious, sacred events to follow. In the first interval after the beginning of the dance, the women and children take breakfast together. Raynel's shamanic rattle signals the resumption of the dance. Its staccato sound is said to break up the normal linear flow of time. The little dance continues all day and late into the first night. The dances are punctuated by chants which grow steadily more intense.
So there's a kind of swing between day, which is human time, night, which is ancestral time. So that's why the small dance is during the day and the big dance at night. And what they have achieved is, in a sense, they will have put into this house, which has become the cosmos, they put themselves into the position of sort of cosmic beings.
It is midnight, time to take off the yellow crowns and put on the full headdresses, the feathers of the ancestors. The little dance is over, and the great sacred dance begins. The feather box, heart of the Maloka, is open.
So when they're in the feather box, it acts as a sort of space-time machine, because the putting on the feathers means that the big space of the universe and the small space of the house and the space of the dancers' bodies becomes one and the same thing.
Now the dancers take the sacred hallucinogen, yahe. It utterly transforms the consciousness and allows them to enter the primordial world of the ancestors. Patterns dance before their eyes as they begin their journey.
This is a moment of great respect. We take Yahe. We think of the whole world, of the sacred sites, the origins of our thought and our dances. This is the most sacred stage. As we dance and sing, we are living in another world, and this other world is inside our Malacca. Even those who are not dancing see the ancestors moving inside the dancers. Everyone's spirit is caught up in this manifestation of the ancestors.
Now I understand why we had to make all those journeys. They reveal to us the paths the dancers now follow in primordial time. They travel upstream. They visit all the sacred sites, seeing the landmark waterfalls, cataracts, and mountains. Reliving the adventures of the mythic heroes. As they enter their own river, the Piraparaná, they approach Cassava Bread Falls. Here the rock comes to life as Cassava Woman appears. She is the soul of womanhood, the creator of life. Her song pierces the rhythm of the dance, the crashing of the river waters around her. The dance and chant journey continues right through the night until dawn.
These dancers dancing round and round and round and round the centre of the house are their moving time. They're moving time forwards. Their movement round the house is the movement of day and night, the movement of the seasons, and also the transition between the ancestors to humans. So it's a whole series of cycles of time.
The dancers continue, entranced, through the whole of the next day. They have now been dancing for nearly 40 hours with nothing but spirit foods to sustain them, a psychic and physical marathon. Now they approach the final climactic act of the great ceremony. On the evening of the second day, 40 hours after it began, the great spell has been woven, and the ritual dancing is complete. Time to unwrap the cassava bread. The dance itself has energized the bread, charging it with ancestral power. This will in turn be absorbed by the guests when they consume it, nourishing them both physically and spiritually. So as Chief Patricio and his wife, Cassava Woman, distribute the bread to their guests, they share both the bounty of the woman's labor and the spiritual nourishment the whole community has generated through the ceremony. As the river people simply say, it gives us life. With the ritual complete and its bounties shared, the guests return home to their own villages. The Maloca is quiet. Just a few families swing in their hammocks. The dance was truly magnificent. In all of my travels, I have never experienced a stronger sense of being in the presence of the sacred. And I now understand how the river peoples interweave the many dimensions of their world into one great chain of energy in their sacred ceremonies. They believe that by reliving the drama of the ancestral journey upstream, they give real strength to the sacred sites. Their rituals reinforce the house posts, which support not just this house, but the entire universe. And their strength, in turn, protects the people from sickness and misfortune. The human, natural, and spiritual worlds are one. Respect for the natural world both honors the ancestors and protects the living. This is a message from the lost civilization of the Amazon, which is now the heritage of the Barasana and their neighbors. They have been the custodians of these rainforests for centuries, and there is every reason that they should remain so in the future.
Making this film is very important. Night and day, sun and moon, the sky and the forest are all ours, created a long time ago. We know the stories of their creation. Yet the primordial first night is exactly the same as this last night, which has just passed. So the importance of this film is to show that we are still living in our lands in the ways the ancestors instructed us to live. It's important that outsiders should know that there's still a people who have ways of thinking and ways of life which follow the ancestral ways, and that we are here today.